Welcome in. Let's start today with a scenario that, I guarantee you've experienced within the last week.
Oh, I'm sure I have.
Right. So you just wrapped up a 30-minute conversation with a colleague, a friend, maybe a family member.
Mm-hmm.
And objectively, nothing terrible happened.
Yeah.
No one yelled. No doors were slammed.
But you walk away feeling completely drained.
Exactly.
Mm.
You feel like you just ran a mental marathon in waist-deep mud. You're exhausted, you're frustrated, and you're probably running a loop in your head, muttering, why do they always have to be like that?
That is such a universal feeling.
It really is. And today, we are targeting that exact feeling of exhaustion. We've got two really fascinating sources on the table today.
Yes, bridging the gap and embracing social differences.
Right. Now, if you look at the covers of these guides, they're specifically targeted at the INFJ personality type.
They are.
But as we dug into the mechanics of what these sources are actually teaching, we realized this is, it's far from just a niche survival guide for one personality type.
Not at all. It's really a masterclass in the invisible friction that dictates every single interaction we have.
A blueprint for mastering social dynamics.
By doing something radically counterintuitive, right? Embracing differences without entirely losing your own identity in the crossfire.
It really is a profound framework. So for our expert here, what is the mission for our deep dive today?
The mission is to fundamentally shift the way you perceive friction in your relationships.
Because, let's be honest, the default human setting is to spend an absurd amount of energy trying to change the people around us.
We constantly do it. We want to mold them or educate them or just argue with them until they finally see the world the right way.
Which inevitably means our way.
Exactly. Our way. But the central thesis we are going to explore today flips that entirely.
Wait, let's unpack this.
It suggests that true social harmony and the internal peace that comes with it, it doesn't come from winning the argument.
Right.
It doesn't come from forcing the world to bend to your operational style. It actually comes from an internal shift in perception.
We're going to look at how you can radically transform your most frustrating relationships simply by altering the lens through which you view them.
Which is incredibly powerful once you get the hang of it.
But before we can even talk about a solution, we have to look at the baseline problem. Why is that default setting so strong?
Why do we always want to change people?
Yeah. Why do our daily interactions naturally skew toward exhaustion rather than synergy?
Our sources point to a concept they call the default human filter.
The default human filter.
Right. And the argument here is that none of us are actually experiencing objective reality.
None of us.
No. We're experiencing a highly curated, deeply biased simulation of reality based on our own internal rulebooks.
That internal rulebook is really the crux of the issue. Think about how you've lived your life. You have a unique set of experiences.
A specific upbringing.
A distinct set of values and a neurological wiring that processes information in a very particular way.
And all of that data coalesces into your rulebook.
It dictates what is polite, what is efficient, what is respectful, and what is logical.
It's a completely natural human survival mechanism to build this rulebook. We need it to function.
But the catastrophic social error we all make is assuming that everyone else was handed the exact same rulebook at birth.
That is the trap.
And when they inevitably violate our rulebook, we don't just note it as a difference in operating systems.
No, we take it personally.
We take it as a personal offense.
Yeah.
Like if my rulebook says that being 10 minutes early to a meeting is the baseline for respect.
Which is very common.
Right? And a coworker casually strolls in right on the dot, or maybe 2 minutes late.
I know exactly where this is going.
I don't think, they operate on a more fluid, event-based timeline.
No, you think they do not respect my time.
Exactly. I think they are arrogant. I am projecting my internal motivations onto their external actions.
Which creates an exhausting cycle of constant misinterpretation.
Constant.
What's fascinating here is how the source material examines this specific cognitive trap through the lens of the INFJ personality.
And it's worth noting, even if you aren't an INFJ, the dynamic here applies to anyone who identifies as highly perceptive or highly empathetic.
Absolutely. People with strong introverted intuition and extroverted feeling.
Which is the core of the INFJ stack.
Right. They have a profound ability to read the emotional undercurrents of a room.
They really do. They can often perceive the underlying motivations, the insecurities, and even the potentials of other people before those people even recognize them in themselves.
They essentially see the matrix of human connection.
Seeing the matrix, I love that phrasing. But the text is very clear that seeing the matrix is a massive double-edged sword.
Because if you can see the optimal way for people to interact,
Mhm.
if you can clearly envision the deep, authentic connection that is theoretically possible.
The actual reality of human interaction is going to constantly disappoint you.
Exactly. You are forever measuring the messy, chaotic reality of the people around you against this idealized, perfect vision of what they could be.
What they should be.
Right. And when they fall short, which they always will because they are human,
It breeds this intense, simmering frustration.
it leads to what the sources describe as a state of constant, exhausting judgment.
You become burdened by your own empathy.
That's a great way to put it. Because you understand how things should be or how people should treat each other, you become hypersensitive to every minor infraction.
Every blunt comment.
Every instance of emotional dissonance. You are carrying the weight of constantly evaluating the world against an impossible standard.
Which brings us to arguably the most visceral metaphor in the entire text.
The camera of judgment.
The camera of judgment. The sources suggest a primary breakthrough here. They argue that the exhaustion you feel after that 30-minute conversation we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
it isn't actually caused by what the other person did.
It's caused by the heavy equipment you are carrying around.
It's caused by the camera of judgment.
It's a brilliant way to visualize the cognitive load of our biases.
It really is.
The text explicitly tells us to remove the camera of judgment from yourself first.
So let's think about what a camera physically does.
Okay.
When you look through a viewfinder, you are making an editorial choice.
You are framing a specific subject.
Right. But by definition, you are excluding everything outside of that frame. You are choosing the lighting, the angle, the focus.
You are isolating a single moment in time and stripping away the broader context.
And when we interact with someone while holding the camera of judgment, we are filming them exclusively through the distorted lens of our own rulebook.
We are the directors of a movie where they don't even know they are the actors.
We are scrutinizing their performance based on a script they never read.
And the instruction to put the camera down, it sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult in practice.
Putting the camera down means surrendering the role of director.
It means stopping the editorializing, instead of constantly framing their actions with the question, why aren't they doing this the way I would?
Putting the camera down allows you to finally see the wider context. You shift to asking, what is the reality of their experience right now?
It forces you to separate observation from evaluation.
That is key.
When the camera is up, an observation like, they're speaking loudly, instantly becomes the evaluation. They are being aggressive and trying to dominate me.
But when you put the camera down, they are speaking loudly remains just that, an observation.
Perhaps they are just naturally boisterous. Perhaps they are incredibly passionate about the topic.
The moment you strip away your own projected evaluation, the emotional friction of the interaction drops significantly.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and reflect on this dynamic in your own life right now.
Think about that coworker who always seems to rub you the wrong way.
Or that family member whose comments always seem to have a subtle bite to them.
If you were to completely strip away your evaluation,
If you forced yourself to just observe them without the camera.
would their actions inherently cause you stress? Or is the stress coming from the fact that they are violating a boundary they don't even know exists?
Are you suffering because of their actions or because of your own unyielding expectations?
That's the crux of the behavioral shift.
The text emphasizes that your perception dictates your reaction.
If your camera of judgment frames someone as a malicious antagonist of your daily life, your body language, your tone, your word choices.
They will all become defensive and sharp. You will preemptively armor up.
But if you shift your perception and recognize that this person is just operating on a fundamentally different, perhaps blunter communication frequency,
Their posture relaxes.
you remain open.
You stop fighting a war they didn't even know they declared. It's an incredible reclamation of your own energy.
And reclaiming that energy perfectly transitions us into the core, actionable solution provided in these guides.
Because once we realize the camera is the problem, once we manage to put it down,
What is the actual strategy for navigating these interactions?
the text introduces a visual that I absolutely love.
It advises us to adapt ourselves like water.
Water takes the shape of its container without ever fundamentally ceasing to be water.
It's a metaphor borrowed from Eastern philosophy, but applied here very practically to modern social dynamics.
Think about the physical properties of water. It is incredibly powerful, yet perfectly yielding.
When you pour water into a tall cylindrical vase, it immediately fills that space. conforming exactly to the dimensions it's given.
And if you pour that same water into a wide, jagged, asymmetrical bowl, it adapts to every crevice instantly.
It doesn't fight the walls of the container.
It doesn't insist on remaining a rigid cube. It finds equilibrium by flowing into the space provided.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Tough for it.
Because when I first read this, my immediate reaction was resistance.
Why is that?
If I am constantly adapting to everyone else's shape, aren't I just being a people pleaser? Aren't I just becoming a chameleon?
That is a very valid concern.
I know a lot of people, especially those who deeply value authenticity, hear the word adapt and they translate it directly to compromise.
They think this text is telling them to abandon their own boundaries.
To agree with things they find offensive and just contort themselves to make everyone else happy.
That is the most common and arguably the most dangerous misinterpretation of this concept.
So how do the sources clarify that?
The sources are incredibly explicit about drawing a hard line between adapting like water and becoming a chameleon. Let's break down the difference.
Okay, let's hear it.
A chameleon changes its colors to camouflage itself. It alters its outward appearance to hide its true nature, usually out of fear or a desire to manipulate.
It's an act of disguise.
Exactly. When you act like a chameleon in a social setting, you are pretending to agree with values you abhor, or you are feigning interests you don't have just to be accepted.
That is self-abandonment. You're essentially lying to keep the peace.
Correct. But the water metaphor represents something fundamentally different.
So?
Water never stops being water. Its molecular structure, H2O, does not change whether it is in a crystal goblet or a muddy puddle.
Its core essence is immutable.
In this framework, your core essence, your values, your fundamental beliefs, your personal ethics, that is your molecular structure.
You do not change those for anyone.
Never. What you are changing is simply your form, your method of delivery.
So adapting like water means observing the communication style of the person you are dealing with.
The shape of that container.
And choosing to present your immutable core in a way that fits comfortably within their space.
Precisely. It's not about changing what you are saying or believing, but changing how you are engaging.
It is about removing the unnecessary friction of delivery.
If you are speaking with someone who values brutal, cold logic, you don't abandon your empathetic goals.
But you translate those goals into logical frameworks.
You are still advocating for what you believe in, but you are doing it in a language they can process without triggering their defenses.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire philosophy is a masterclass in the locus of control.
It really is.
So often, we feel exhausted and powerless in relationships because we have placed our locus of control externally.
We are subconsciously demanding that the other person change their shape to accommodate us.
We want them to be softer or more organized or more considerate.
And when they refuse, because people rarely change on demand, we feel defeated.
Trying to control the container is a guaranteed path to misery.
You cannot dictate someone else's neurological wiring or their entrenched habits.
The only variable in any interaction over which you have total, absolute, unimpeachable control is yourself.
Your responses, your perspective, your delivery.
By embracing the water metaphor, you are pulling the locus of control back internally.
You aren't a passive victim of a difficult coworker's blunt communication style.
You are an active strategist, recognizing their rigid edges and consciously choosing to flow around them to achieve your own goals with minimal energy expenditure.
It transforms social interaction from a battleground into an environment you are actively navigating.
The text says it beautifully. It's not what others do, but what you do and how you think that truly matters.
You are taking the wheel.
And to help us actually execute this in the real world, the sources don't just leave us with metaphors.
No, they get very practical.
They provide a highly detailed empathy toolkit utilizing the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI, to map out the different containers we are going to encounter.
The MBTI is a fantastic vocabulary for this exercise, but we need to establish the exact same caveat the sources do.
Which is?
Using personality frameworks can be dangerous if applied incorrectly. The goal here is absolutely not to diagnose your colleagues, slap a 4-letter label on their forehead, and use that label to dismiss them or box them in.
We aren't doing amateur psychoanalysis.
Definitely not.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we aren't trying to figure out their deep psychological makeup, what are we actually doing with these MBTI types?
The text argues that we only need to understand the perception dynamic at play.
It's about recognizing the operational frequency of the person in front of you.
We know our audience today is familiar with the basic traits of these types. You know that an ESTP is energetic and an INTP is analytical.
What we are going to do now is look at the specific friction points
The blind spots.
that occur when you, perhaps coming from a place of deep intuition and feeling, collide with these wildly different operational frequencies.
And more importantly, exactly how you become water in each specific scenario.
Let's dive into the deep end. We'll start with a group we can call the pragmatists.
The ISTP and the ISTJ.
Let's look at the ISTP dynamic first. As we know, the ISTP operates on a baseline of intense, independent practicality.
They are the mechanics of the personality world.
They look at a situation, identify the broken parts, and want to apply the most efficient, logical fix possible.
Usually without any desire for external input.
The friction arises because they strip away all the emotional padding that other types rely on for comfort.
Right. Imagine a scenario. You are an INFJ or any empathetic type, and you're managing a project that has just hit a major roadblock.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Your instinct is to gather the team, discuss how everyone is feeling about the setback, process the collective frustration, and then collaboratively envision a path forward.
That sounds like a great supportive approach to me.
You bring this approach to your lead developer, who happens to be an ISTP. You start talking about the team's morale and the overarching vision.
To me, I am being inclusive.
But to the ISTP container, you are pouring in chaos.
Wow. Chaos.
They don't want to talk about morale. They want to look at the code, find the bug, and fix it.
From their perspective, my emotional processing is highly inefficient and totally irrelevant to the mechanical problem at hand.
Exactly. If you insist on having a 45-minute feelings check-in, the ISTP is going to feel suffocated and micromanaged.
They will likely become blunt, perhaps even dismissive.
Which you will then perceive as hostile and uncaring.
Boom. Massive friction.
So how do we pour water into the ISTP container?
The sources give us the playbook, it says. Be concise.
Strip out the abstract concepts.
Give them the facts. But the most crucial adaptation is about autonomy.
If you want to work smoothly with an ISTP, you define the problem, you establish the deadline, and then you have to actively suppress your own desire to check in.
You step back.
That stepping back is the adaptation. You have to recognize that your need for constant collaborative connection is your need, not theirs.
For an ISTP, autonomy is trust.
When you leave them alone to solve the problem, you are speaking their language of respect.
You adapt by letting go of the reins. If they hit a wall, they will come to you, but only if they know you won't smother them with emotional processing when they do.
Now let's pivot to the other pragmatist, the ISTJ.
We know they share that practical nature, but their container is built out of entirely different materials.
The text emphasizes their deep reliance on structure, organization, and precedent.
They are the guardians of tradition and routine.
Where the ISTP wants to quietly fix things on the fly, the ISTJ wants a meticulously documented plan before anyone even touches a tool.
The friction point with an ISTJ almost always revolves around flexibility, or their perceived lack of it.
They rely on knowing what to expect. Spontaneity is not a fun adventure for them. It is a threat to stability.
Think about pitching an idea. You are excited, the creative juices are flowing, and you bounce into your ISTJ manager's office.
Here we go.
You say, I have this amazing vision for the new campaign. Let's just scrap the old template, throw some totally wild concepts at the wall, and see where the energy takes us.
To you, that's inspiring.
And to the ISTJ,
That is a horror movie.
a horror movie.
You are asking them to abandon the safety of proven structures for the chaos of energy.
Their immediate reaction will be to shut the idea down.
Not because the idea is inherently bad, but because the delivery was devoid of structure.
They will instinctively throw up roadblocks, demanding budgets, timelines, and risk assessments that you haven't even thought about yet.
You walk away thinking they're a stubborn dinosaur.
And they walk away thinking you are a reckless liability.
The adaptation here is all about translation.
You do not have to abandon your wild creative vision.
You just have to build a sturdy container for it before you present it to them.
The text says you must provide a clear plan and upfront expectations.
You adapt your delivery. You walk into that office and say, I've reviewed the metrics from the last campaign, and I've developed a structured proposal for a new direction.
I have a phased rollout plan and a preliminary risk assessment here for your review.
You are still pitching the same wild idea, but you wrapped it in the comforting language of structure and precedent.
You reduce their resistance by making them feel secure in the process.
Exactly. You float into their need for order, allowing your idea to actually be heard rather than immediately rejected on procedural grounds.
Now, let's completely shift the energy and look at the action-oriented types.
The ESTP and the ENFP.
This is where the water metaphor gets really tested, because you aren't just adapting to a static container.
You are adapting to a rushing river.
The text describes the ESTP as immediate, hands-on, outgoing, loud, and boisterous.
They are pure kinetic energy.
I always picture the ESTP as the person who wants to jump out of the airplane first and figure out the parachute mechanics while in free fall.
That is painfully accurate. They thrive on adrenaline and immediate tangible action.
But if your internal rulebook dictates that every decision needs to be deeply reflected upon, researched, and quietly deliberated,
Being in the blast radius of an ESTP is exhausting.
you feel like you are constantly being dragged into a tornado.
And the instinct for a quieter, more reflective type is to slam on the brakes.
When the ESTP comes in hot with a loud, risky proposal, the intuitive feeler often responds with caution, listing all the potential emotional or logistical pitfalls.
Which the ESTP perceives as an attempt to kill their momentum. They hate feeling stalled.
So they push harder, they get louder, and the interaction spirals into a conflict of force versus resistance.
The adaptation strategy the sources provide here is brilliant, and it addresses your earlier fear about being a chameleon.
The text explicitly says, avoid confrontation and conflict. Meeting an ESTP's force with your own stubborn resistance is a losing battle.
But it also doesn't say you have to become loud and boisterous yourself.
You don't have to fake their energy.
Instead, the adaptation is to engage with them dynamically. You match their momentum, but in your own way.
You redirect the river instead of building a dam.
If the ESTP says, let's completely overhaul the entire sales strategy by tomorrow,
You don't say, that's impossible and reckless.
you say, okay, I love the energy. Let's get to a whiteboard right now and brainstorm the fastest way to prototype that idea.
You validate their need for immediate action and calculated risk, but you channel it into a collaborative, slightly more structured format.
You show them you are open to the adventure, which lowers their defensive need to push so hard.
You become a partner in the momentum rather than a roadblock.
And what about the ENFP?
They share that intense, forward-moving energy, but it's directed completely differently.
The text points out their rapid-fire ideas, their deep need for connection, and their reliance on external validation.
They are idea geysers.
Yes, the ENFP isn't necessarily seeking physical action like the ESTP. They are seeking conceptual exploration and enthusiastic validation.
They want to brainstorm 50 different possibilities, connect them to human experiences, and feel your excitement mirroring theirs.
Which, again, can be incredibly draining if you are an introverted linear processor.
If you like to take one idea, take it back to your desk, quietly analyze it for 3 days, and then return with a verdict.
The ENFP's barrage of 50 ideas feels like an assault on your cognitive processing.
You might inadvertently shut them down by just sitting there silently overwhelmed, or by trying to logically dismantle their ideas one by one as they speak.
And to an ENFP, that silent, logical dismantling feels like a personal rejection.
They are offering you their creativity as a means of connection.
If you reject the ideas coldly, you are rejecting the connection.
The text tells us that to adapt to an ENFP, you must recognize that underlying need.
The adaptation isn't about agreeing to execute all 50 of their ideas.
It's about matching their energy where appropriate and showing genuine interest in the process of their brainstorming.
It's validating the generation, not necessarily the execution.
You adapt by saying, wow, the sheer volume of ideas you're generating is incredible.
Yeah.
I really love the direction of that third concept you mentioned. Let's explore how that would actually feel for the end user.
You ride the wave of their enthusiasm for a bit.
You give them the external validation they crave, which makes them feel safe and heard, and then you gently steer the conversation toward the most viable option.
You've adapted to their chaotic creative container without committing to the chaos yourself.
Let's pull the energy back down and examine a much softer dynamic.
The nurturers and creatives, represented here by the ISFJ and the ISFP.
These are often the unsung heroes of any organization or family.
But their quiet nature makes them incredibly susceptible to being misunderstood or entirely overlooked.
The text describes the ISFJ as deeply nurturing, supportive, but fundamentally quiet.
They are the bedrock. They make sure the details are handled, the people are cared for, and the traditions are upheld.
But the danger here is that in our fast-paced, loud society, we often equate silence with agreement.
Or worse, with a lack of critical thought.
If you are in a meeting with an ISFJ and you are throwing around aggressive new strategies, they are likely not going to interrupt you to point out the flaws.
They will sit quietly, processing the impact your ideas will have on the people involved and perhaps feeling deeply anxious about it.
And if you just assume their silence means they are fully on board, you're going to be blindsided later when they passively resist the implementation.
The text is very clear on how to adapt to this container. You have to actively build a safe bridge for them to cross.
The adaptation is all about intentional appreciation and careful listening. You cannot expect them to fight for the floor.
You have to explicitly invite them in, and you have to do it gently.
You pause the aggressive brainstorming and you say, I know we are moving fast here, but I really value your perspective on how this is going to affect the team's day-to-day workload. What are your thoughts?
You adapt by lowering your own volume, expressing gratitude for their consistent, quiet efforts,
And creating a space where they know their specific people-focused concerns will be treated with respect, not debated.
When they feel valued, their container opens up.
The ISFP requires a similar gentleness, but the focus is different.
The text highlights their deeply sensitive and uniquely creative nature.
An ISFP experiences the world through a highly aesthetic, deeply personal lens,
Their creativity isn't just a skill, it's an extension of their identity.
which means if you are working with an ISFP on a project and you purely focus on the cold, hard functionality while completely ignoring the design, the feel, or the aesthetics,
They are going to disengage.
they will feel alienated because you are ignoring the very thing that brings them alive.
The adaptation here, according to the source, is to actively appreciate their unique artistic talents and specifically solicit their input on the elements they care about.
Even if the project is highly technical, you find the intersection.
You adapt by saying, we have the core functionality locked down, but it feels rigid. Given your incredible eye for user experience and visual flow, how can we make this interface feel more intuitive and engaging?
You validate their unique perspective. You make them feel included by honoring the specific shape of their creative container.
Let's shift gears to a dynamic that often causes massive headaches for intuitive feelers.
The analysts and strategists, the INTP and the INTJ.
These are the heavyweights of logic and strategy. Let's start with the INTP.
The text points out that they are fiercely logical, analytical, and objective.
They inhabit a world of theories, data, and pure reason.
The friction here is legendary.
If you approach an INTP to convince them of something, and your primary argument is based on how it will make people feel,
Or how it aligns with a vague sense of moral rightness.
you are speaking a language they do not recognize as valid for decision-making.
To an INTP, an emotional appeal in a logical debate is not just unconvincing, it is intellectually offensive. It feels manipulative.
Imagine you are trying to convince your INTP partner that you need to move to a new neighborhood.
You say, I just have a really bad feeling about this area. The energy is off, and I don't feel connected to the community.
The INTP is going to look at you blankly.
They are going to pull up the crime statistics, the property value trends, and the school district ratings, and tell you that objectively, the neighborhood is optimal.
You feel invalidated, and they feel like you were being irrational.
To pour water into the INTP container, you have to completely strip away the subjective.
The text says, be clear, be concise, and provide the relevant data up front.
You have to engage them on the battlefield of deep analytical discussion.
If you want to move, you adapt your argument. You say, I've analyzed our commute times, the noise pollution metrics, and the lack of walkable amenities, and the data suggests our quality of life would quantifiably improve in this other zip code. Here is the spreadsheet.
And the brilliant insight from the text is that they respect a well-reasoned argument, even if they ultimately disagree with it.
You don't have to win the debate to earn their respect. You just have to prove that you understand the rules of logic.
If you show up with data, they will engage with you respectfully, even if they spend an hour tearing your data apart.
You've adapted by stepping onto their playing field.
The INTJ is a slightly different puzzle.
They share the INTP's deep intellect, but their application is fiercely strategic.
They are the grand architects. They're always focused on the long-term vision, the ultimate goal.
And the text notes a very specific, very frustrating challenge with INTJs. They can be incredibly closed off to feedback once they have formulated their master plan.
Right. They've spent weeks building this complex strategic web in their head, anticipating every variable.
When you casually stroll up and say, hey, what if we tried doing it this way instead?
They don't see a helpful suggestion.
They see someone trying to yank a load-bearing pillar out of their carefully constructed cathedral.
They will dismiss you instantly, not because they are arrogant, but because they assume you haven't done the requisite strategic modeling to justify altering the plan.
Which is incredibly frustrating if you are trying to be collaborative.
But the adaptation strategy here is incredibly potent. The text says you must understand their long-term vision.
You cannot pitch a suggestion in a vacuum.
If you want an INTJ to actually listen to you, you must frame your idea by demonstrating exactly how it acts as a lever to accelerate their end goals.
You have to show them the math on how your idea serves their vision.
You don't say, I think this new software would be fun to try.
You adapt and say, I know our primary strategic objective for Q3 is to reduce client onboarding friction by 20%. I've mapped out how integrating this new software eliminates 3 redundant data entry steps, getting us to that 20% target 2 weeks ahead of schedule.
Suddenly, you aren't an annoying distraction. You are a strategic asset. You've adapted your delivery to bypass their defenses.
Let's look at the final pairing from the text, the idealists.
The INFP, and returning to our starting point, the INFJ.
The text states that INFPs are driven by a profound internal sense of idealism.
They hold their personal values closer than almost any other type. Everything they do is filtered through a deeply personal question.
Is this authentic to who I am?
And that intense radar for authenticity is exactly where the friction happens.
Because if you approach an INFP with corporate jargon, or if you try to use slick transactional networking tactics on them, their internal alarms go off.
They can detect a manufactured persona from a mile away.
If they sense that you are just trying to manage them or that you don't genuinely believe what you are saying, they will instantly erect an impenetrable emotional wall.
They will politely nod, and you will never actually reach them.
The adaptation here is terrifying for a lot of people in professional settings because the adaptation is vulnerability.
The text says you must be completely genuine and honest. You cannot fake an interaction with an INFP.
If you want to connect with them or motivate them, you have to find the actual genuine intersection between the task at hand and their deeply held beliefs.
The text suggests highlighting how a project aligns with their personal goals. But you can't just make it up.
You adapt by doing the hard work of understanding what they actually care about.
You strip away the superficial management speak.
You sit down and say, look, I know parts of this project are tedious, but the end result of this data analysis is going to directly improve the resources we can allocate to the community outreach program, which I know you are passionate about.
You connect the mundane to the meaningful. That is the only way to flow into the INFP container.
And finally, the text brings this all home to the hardest mirror of all.
What happens when an INFJ faces another INFJ, or faces someone who is just so fundamentally, stubbornly resistant to your values that adaptation seems impossible?
This is the moment of truth.
Because for a type that is constantly trying to optimize human connection, encountering someone who refuses to connect or who holds values you find actively distasteful is agonizing.
Your instinct is to try harder.
To explain it better, to finally make them see the light.
And that is exactly the trap the text warns against.
The ultimate adaptation, the highest level of this framework, is accepting a bitter pill.
Everyone is entitled to their own beliefs, no matter how wrong you think they are.
The instruction here is to stop trying to change them. Let go of the rope. You stop playing tug of war.
The adaptation becomes entirely internal.
You acknowledge that their container is incompatible with yours, and you choose to maintain a polite, neutral environment, focusing your energy inward to protect your own peace.
You stop banging your head against the wall of their worldview.
So what does this all mean? We have spent all this time going deep into these specific adaptations, learning how to bend and flow and translate our communication for every possible container.
But this naturally transitions us into a crucial boundary that the sources establish.
If we are constantly adapting like water to smooth out friction, what happens when it just doesn't work? Is there a limit to how much we should adapt?
Absolutely. The text does not advocate for martyrdom.
It provides a very clear, very necessary caveat regarding compatibility.
While the entire premise of the empathy toolkit is about adapting to foster harmony and bridge communication gaps, it explicitly acknowledges that some environments are fundamentally toxic.
Not everyone's behavior is conducive to a positive environment, no matter how much water you pour on the situation.
Recognizing toxicity is the key. There is a massive difference between someone who has a blunt communication style, like our ISTP example earlier, and someone who is actively abusive, manipulative, or endlessly negative.
The text draws a firm boundary here. Adapting is a tool for connection.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not a tool for enduring abuse.
It is not an excuse to contort yourself to accommodate behavior that is actively destructive to your mental health.
This raises an important question about self-preservation.
When you are dealing with a truly toxic container, the water metaphor shifts.
If you pour pure water into a vat of toxic sludge, you don't purify the sludge, you just poison the water.
The source explicitly states that if someone's behavior is genuinely incompatible with your well-being, you should not force a connection that isn't working.
It gives you absolute, unequivocal permission to disengage.
It says it is entirely acceptable and sometimes necessary to step back and remove them from your life.
You don't have to be the universal solvent for everyone's problems.
If you have put down your camera of judgment,
If you have genuinely tried to understand their operational dynamic,
if you have attempted to adapt your delivery and the interaction remains consistently destructive,
the healthiest choice, the most self-aware adaptation you can make is to turn off the tap.
you remove yourself from the situation. You protect your own peace.
That boundary is what makes this entire framework an act of empowerment rather than an act of submission.
You are not blindly serving others. You are strategically choosing where to invest your energy.
In most daily interactions, adapting your behavior will dissolve the minor frictions of life and open up incredible potential.
But retaining the right to walk away ensures that you are always the master of your own environment.
As we start to pull all of these threads together and synthesize the journey we've been on today, the ultimate takeaway for you, listening right now, is incredibly profound.
The sources paint a picture of reality that is humbling.
The world is a massive, complex tapestry of unique individuals.
Every single person you meet, the barista, your boss, your partner, that annoying guy in traffic, has a completely unique set of experiences.
A unique neurological wiring and a unique internal rule book that shapes exactly how they process reality.
They have deeply ingrained reasons for thinking and behaving exactly the way they do.
And 9 times out of 10, their behavior has absolutely nothing to do with you.
The great challenge of mastering social dynamics is accepting that reality.
It is the conscious, daily effort to put away that heavy camera of judgment. The lens that tells you your way is the objective truth, and everyone else is just acting wrong.
When you truly accept that others are entitled to their own perspectives, you unlock a superpower.
You choose to adapt, like water.
You flow into interactions with curiosity instead of defensiveness.
You adjust your communication style to fit their container.
And in doing so, you bypass the endless, exhausting friction of ego and judgment.
You unlock the door to genuinely meaningful, enriching connections that you would have completely missed if you had stayed rigid.
You become the architect of your social environment. You stop exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable behaviors of everyone else, and you focus all of your energy on the one thing you can control.
How you perceive and react, that is where your true power lies.
Before we wrap up, we want to echo a direct call to action from the source material itself.
It poses a brilliant, simple question, and we want to leave it with you today. What is one small step you can take today to embrace a social difference you've previously found challenging?
Just one step.
Maybe it's taking a breath before snapping at that coworker who always interrupts, and actually considering their perspective.
Maybe it's asking a question instead of instantly making an assumption.
Think about what that one small act of adaptation looks like for you today.
And as you think about that step, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought that builds on everything we've discussed about the water metaphor.
We've talked extensively about adapting like water to make others feel comfortable, to fill the shape of their container without losing your core essence.
But consider this physical reality of water. Water doesn't just take the shape of its container. Over time, with persistent, gentle, unyielding contact, water can also reshape the solid stone it rests upon.
By choosing the quiet strength of adaptation instead of the abrasive friction of judgment, what profound, gradual changes might you inspire in the people around you, simply by refusing to fight their shape?
What a beautiful, powerful thought to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away today with a new lens, or rather, a new willingness to put the lens down entirely, when navigating the complex, frustrating, and ultimately beautiful world of human connection. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.